Hello again. I sometimes wonder if the British people do not suffer from some strange kind of collective amnesia about their history. For example, they are ready enough to remember the Spanish Armada and its defeat, but honestly seem to forget that a few years later Muslim forces from North Africa landed in their country and set up a base from which they attacked shipping in the English Channel. Raids were also made upon the English and Irish coast, with whole communities seized and carried off into captivity. The government in London at that time was completely unable to do anything about it. I wonder if any of this rings bells with any viewers. Did they know that for more than 5 years a Muslim settlement existed on English territory, and that from this stronghold fierce assaults were launched upon communities in England and Ireland? I suspect that this will be news to most people. In the 17th century, the Muslim Empire of the Ottomans, with its capital in what is now Istanbul, stretched from the Middle East all the way to the Atlantic via North Africa. The Ottomans hoped, of course, to conquer Europe ultimately, and they were constantly conducting little probing attacks by land and sea to find weaknesses which they could exploit. This all continued throughout almost the whole of the 17th century, culminating in the summer of 1683 with the siege of Vienna, when the Muslim armies reached Austria and hoped to sweep into Europe and add it to the Muslim world. In the decades before this, naval forces from the Ottoman provinces in North Africa, the so-called Barbary Coast, had been harrying shipping belonging to European nations and making raids upon the coasts of Spain, France, Italy, and of course Britain. Although we dismiss these activities today as piracy, they were really all of a piece with the actions of the Turkish armies in the Balkans. They were a search for weakness. In August 1625, a raiding party landed at Mounts Bay in Cornwall. The villagers saw the ships at anchor and fled for safety to the local church, but this was not enough to save them. 60 people were dragged out of the church where they had sought refuge, loaded into rowing boats and taken on board the waiting ships. They all ended up in the slave markets of North Africa. On the 12th of that month, the Mayor of Plymouth wrote to the Privy Council in London. He pleaded for assistance from the Navy because in 10 days, 27 ships had been taken and all the men on board, over 200 of them, had been made slaves. This may have been part of the same jihad which the Ottomans were engaged in on land, but the men from Algiers and Tunis were always on the lookout for a little bit of loot on the side, hence the slave raiding. The island of Lundy lies in the Bristol Channel and is part of the county of Devon. You can see it from Devon. It is not a particularly impressive place, being just 3 miles long and half a mile wide. It's rocky and barren, and although it's a wonderful refuge for seabirds, it's not much of a place to live. In 1627, a fleet of ships from the territory of Saleh, which is now Morocco, took control of the island and remained there on and off for years. It was a forward position of the Ottoman Empire, right in the heart of English waters, within sight of Devon, where Francis Drake famously set off from to defeat the Armada. And there was nothing the English could do about it. From this base, the Muslims set about raiding other parts of the British Isles. In 1631, for instance, came a land raid on Ireland. Baltimore was a small village on the southernmost tip of Ireland. In the middle of June that year, a fishing boat captained by a man called John Hackett had been boarded in the Irish Sea by men from Lundy, and fearing that he would be taken to a life of slavery in North Africa, he struck a deal with his captors. In return for his own freedom, he would guide them to a sleepy little village which they could take by surprise, and then cause as much havoc as they wished and take as many victims as they pleased. On the night of 20th of June, he went ashore with the landing party and led them to Baltimore. A total of 89 women and children and 20 men were taken prisoner that night and endured a journey of 38 days before they arrived in Algiers, where they were sold to the highest bidder. Some of the men ended up as galley slaves. The women either were employed as seamstresses or became concubines. In England, there was pressure on King Charles I to enter into negotiations to secure the freedom of these men and women, but he refused on the grounds that it would only encourage more such outrages in the future. You will sometimes hear it said that no enemy has ever landed in this country since the Norman invasion of 1066, but this is nonsense. There was a time when Muslim forces landed here whenever they pleased, and there was nothing at all that we could do about it. It's strange how this has faded from memory. As usual, in the description to this video, I give links about what I've been saying.